Move in, like.
Here we go.
Not just the chair, but you have
Right.
Started. Right. Sorry about that.
And will the comments come up? Do you remember sometimes they don't come up? Oh.
You can start slowly.
There's one person.
Yeah. Oh, we're starting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, hello everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to another CORC YouTube live chat for young people. Should we all introduce ourselves?
Yeah, sounds good. You want to go first?
Okay. I'm Beth Ingram. I am a board member for CORC, and outside of that, run Hearts and Minds and do like kind of youth mental health consultancy stuff.
Yeah.
I'm Kate, and Kate Dalzell, and I am the director at CORC. This is my first chat.
Yeah, we
just
just allowed you on the chat for the first time.
I don't breach the etiquette or go really off script, but I think that I get.
This is your chance to go wild.
Today. And my name is Luís Costa da Silva, and I'm a researcher at CORC.
Cool. Okay, so we wanted to start a bit with thinking about. Oh, I can hear myself. Okay, so we wanted to start with thinking about what's going on generally at CORC and sort of updating people a bit on that. So we've got a few different things coming up at the moment. It's quite a busy time.
Yeah.
So what have we got coming up?
So in mid-November, we've got our CORC Forum. So that's very exciting. That's our once a year event. We have our seminars as well in the spring, and people who are under 25 can come to that for free. So do have a look and see if you think it would be interesting for you.
Amazing.
There's a slot on the agenda which is being taken by some of the young people who are helping us with our video project, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yes, yeah.
But the other bits of the agenda, are all around kind of whether outcome measurement is working well in all the different contexts and how it's working internationally in schools and for different types of people.
So definitely come to the forum, and I've just seen that we've Lock5718 has said hello. So hello, and we've got Maya. Hello, Maya.
Hello.
And so not only have we got the forum, we've also got our newsletter where you can find out about all the stuff going on at CORC really, and also latest research that's published and like CORC's thoughts on that. So I'd really, really recommend signing up to that. And as part of this, the direction we've been going with young people and the feedback we've been getting from these chats, we've got a new section on the newsletter which is going to be very young person orientated. So
so we've absolutely made a commitment that at least one of the things on the newsletter will have a real mind to reflecting back what young people are telling us or interested in, or activity that's happening with and for people who are young person networks. And that's part of us wanting to have more young people sign up to our network and then hopefully get more involved with CORC's projects as we get more projects going. So we hope that newsletter will get a bit more open to different types of audiences, not just to the kind of mental health services audience. So feedback on the newsletter. Yes,
be honest. I actually think I'm sometimes quite a critical person of things in general. But
we never noticed that.
But I think the newsletter is brilliant, and I actually really enjoy reading through and understanding some of the research that is almost translated in that newsletter in a way that's accessible to not only like me as a younger person, but me as a human who's not in the research world.
And one of the things that makes it more fun is blogs and case studies and things. So life stories as well from people's experiences of that might be relevant to other people are really welcome.
Definitely. And with that, I think we've been thinking about youth involvement at CORC more generally, haven't we? So as director of CORC, do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I suppose that we've realised that we probably need a bit more resource to really drive it forward. So we are really keen, but we are a pretty small team. So, but because we're committed, we're going to get some extra capacity in to help us make it happen.
Which is super exciting. Like, so I think
hopefully it will be.
You saw it on Kate's face there. So am I right in saying, like, you've definitely been listening to what people have been saying in these chats and kind of following quite closely? And so what we want to make sure is that we don't do what I've personally seen kind of happen in other places, which is commit to a load and then not follow through on it because we don't have the resources in place. So we're going to look for resources and think about not just look for, but we've committed that we're going to get those. And then hopefully if you follow us on Twitter and Facebook and sign up to the newsletter, you'll see opportunities come up very soon, including in the next one, hopefully.
Yeah, there will be in the next one. And do follow us on Twitter as well, and sign up to the network, whatever, and we will distraction. We will make sure that we keep you in the loop as we build that up a bit. And at the moment, we're already got kind of one project that we're doing at the moment that's a kind of modular video-based thing, where some young people are doing some interviews and thinking about kind of what happens to the questionnaires that get filled in services, and just having young people ask directly the questions that they want to ask of people in services and researchers and in different contexts about, well, what the hell happens with our information next, and what's being done with it, and issues which I think we're going to perhaps touch on today as well, hopefully. So that can all feed in. And we're just really conscious of all of the different times when we are speaking to practitioners or commissioners, maybe when we're doing training days or when we have the opportunity to speak at events. And often we've got young person's views at second hand rather than more directly from hearing about people. So we're hoping to just not have to do that anymore, but to be able to have some people who can be talking and influencing us a bit more directly. And broader views represented as well. Absolutely. So hopefully that sounds positive to people. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you think we should be doing anything different. I'm trying to think what that would be like. Don't resource this project. Resourcing youth involvement is a bad thing. Don't listen to us, stop listening.
But please, to those people who are watching this and who have been involved for a while with these chats and are interested, do keep an eye out on the newsletter, because it would be really good to get your expertise and experiences involved in future projects. And if you and you can always email us as well. I know Beth says to me, nobody's emailing anybody anymore, but if you don't see it in the newsletter or it goes into your junk, or you just want to do it now, be in touch.
If you email the CORC inbox, which is corc@annafreud.org, it's one of us that picks up the email. So it's not just an automated reply. It's actually a person behind the screen talking to you.
You could just say, here's my name. I'm happy to be kept.
Exactly. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's Martha, other people in the team.
Yes. And on that, I realised we didn't introduce the rest of the people in the room. So we've got a brilliant team helping us to do this. Yes, of producers and fans.
Live audience.
Yes. So I'm guessing people can't really come and introduce themselves, but we've got amazing Martha, who I got told off for calling a fabulous queen the other day, but I stand by it. I stand by it. I agree. The most so organised in a way that I will never be. We've got Lucy, who's been amazing with the social media. So we're going to be putting on Twitter as well, and Lucy's getting involved with CORC and is involved with Anna Freud as well. We've got the fabulous Anya, who's doing technology, and that's as much as I know about technology, but who is organising this whole thing, producer. And we've got Nick, who is very important and here to oversee what we say and make sure that I think Nick is representing your close eye.
He's very important. Yeah.
Yes. And Anand, who will be joining us in a sec, so I'll leave Anand to introduce himself in a bit. I guess a few things before we go on. Firstly, one thing that we need to check is Lucy's really keen to take quotes of what people have said during this chat anonymously and just put them on Twitter, because we know that professionals are quite interested in these conversations and people generally. So if you're okay with that, please do comment that you're okay with that. Again, it would all be completely anonymous, so it would just be like, you know, Louise said data is important. Oh shit, that's not anonymous.
This is in the US, it's fine.
Yes. So
I think we'll take it out of context, and we'll just have in the context of our YouTube live chat. People said this.
Yes. Okay.
And
mine's good with that.
We will also add stars to anything totally inappropriate.
Yes. Yeah. Any appalling people who've made very poor language choices.
Oh, no, we won't tease them for blushing at all.
Thank you, Kate. Okay. And Amber, hello Amber, nice to have you here, and thank you for saying that's good too. And the other thing, moving on quickly from the error of my ways.
We just want to touch base with people about what we might talk about at other live chats. I think, having said that, lots of the time we're talking to practitioners and we've only heard secondhand actually at CORC about young person perspectives, or maybe we did a focus group but it was a particular point in time, some time ago or something, or a particular group. So we just wanted to see of the things that the debates that we're in and the things that we're interested in and come up in the sessions that we're at, whether there are any of them that people think would be interesting for a live chat and what that you're interested in, that you would be interesting to talk about or not. And one of the things that comes up a lot for us is whether there's a difference between mental health and emotional well-being, and then with well-being not good, being good, and mental ill health being quite different things. And we know that we know some things about that from a research perspective, but then the felt experience can be quite different. And it comes up quite a lot for services and for people who are thinking about where money goes and who gets support. And I see a lot about it in the media with people saying, being cross, that that they feel like they're very not well, like they're very ill, and the people are saying, oh, well, why don't you go for a run or whatever.
And equally the other way, where once you have any sort of diagnosis, everything's assumed to be about that diagnosis, or that generally we're often educating a lot of people on mental illness as a concept, but not on like well-being and how to look after our
and stuff that might be useful for quite a lot of people. And so I suppose, anyone saying?
Yes. So what are your views on that topic, and whether you think that would be a good topic to possibly discuss in the future? Because that's certainly something that CORC is thinking about, and we want these chats to not only inform what CORC looks into, but also inform the projects CORC's already involved with and thinking about. So please comment that, and Maya, thank you for saying get me a bleep machine. I appreciate that helpful comment. Was
Should we keep going and people can pitch in? Yeah, so one of the other things, and it's not that we've written them on the window to help us, one of the things is whether or not people who are starting services want to know about other young people's experience of the service. So one of the things that we used to always say until we started talking to people about it was that services should be totally transparent, and if anyone comes in to a service, you should be saying to them, this is how many people have got better in our service, or this is how many people keep coming to our service rather than drop out for whatever reason, or this is how many people like our service, or and then we started talking to people and people started saying, well, those people might not be like me, and that could be really discouraging, or it could feel like loads of pressure, or there could be lots of reasons why actually people would find that a bit not really about them, for example. And because we'd started assuming that it would be good to be transparent and open and share that information and help people make choices by giving them that information and things, we kind of were like, oh no, what is the right thing to say on this issue? So that's another one.
And so I've seen that Maya said, I think that would be good. I work in a college and we have a lot of young people that confuse the two. I mean, I confuse the two. I don't think
that's about mental ill health. The last,
So I don't think there's a clear line, and that would be a really interesting thing to discuss. And Amber said, unsure if you have this right, but I think it would be good to distinguish between mental health, mental illness, and emotional well-being. We go through this briefly in mental health first aid training, and it seems to help. Okay, so that's interesting. And I guess particularly, Amber, whether, because sometimes I see people present things in a very simple way, and I'd like to know whether the research actually backs that up or not. So like, I think that can be a really helpful way to present these things. But I'd also like to know if the research, whether the research says that or not, and just think about that in general. So it sounds like people would be quite interested in that topic. And the last one, I guess, is the difference between when people should see services and get professional help and when it's helpful to help ourselves, and whether there's a clear line, and whether,
and even why, why there are certain times when actually it's not that helpful to perhaps have to commit to something every week, or maybe go to a weird building that's maybe in school hours, or whatever it might be, or I don't know, or for other reasons.
Yeah, and I think certainly, like, often I see the kind of professional world and commissioners see it as a very simple, once someone gets this level of severity, they should see specialist services. But I often see, like, I think it's far more complex than that, because, like,
you might already have been in services.
Yes,
You might have quite a lot of feelings about whether or not it's helpful.
Yes. Also, there might be lots of reasons why specialist services don't feel right for you at that moment, or similarly reasons why actually earlier on you might want more specialist input to stop things from getting to any sort of point. So I think that could be a really interesting one as well. So please let us know what your thoughts are on that.
We may need a snappier way of saying it.
I think I need a snappier way of saying most things in my life.
It doesn't sound very...
Yes, Maya says many young people are in emotional distress and confuse it as mental illness. It makes it really hard for us to help them. And I guess as well, that assumes we know that mental illness is a set thing, and actually, I don't know, if you look at most diagnostic criteria, it's a very messy topic. So definitely, Amber said, understanding when a person could use self-help tools effectively and when it is time for professional support. There doesn't seem to be a criteria as such for this.
I think that's quite right, And even, not even just criteria, just like things to bear in mind when thinking about those things. I mean, it could be, because we could just a starting point even.
And whether there should ever be a should in it, or whether actually, because I think actually it's hugely individual and up to a person what they do. But there are lots of things to consider in making that kind of decision, like you say, like a criteria or guidance.
Because you're the expert on what's going to help you, but at the same time, there's plenty of times when a bit of advice comes in handy. And often neither are allowed. So you're not allowed to make a decision for yourself often, particularly if you're seen as someone more severe or more complex. But equally, you don't have access to that advice when and how you want it often. So brilliant. Okay, and Keisha is saying most of the patients we see feel they have had to act extremely in order to access help. 100%. So Amber, thresholds are high, which make things very difficult, and cuts in services. For example, locally we had big cuts in youth work centres, which were picking up low-level mental health issues without having to use statutory service. Yes, definitely. So it sounds like there is a lot of appetite for these conversations. So I think we have our answer in that. Good. Those ones are okay. And hey, ideas on things that you'd think would be interesting.
Yeah,
be really good.
If you sign up to our newsletter, continue to come to these chats if you want. Sign up now. But if there's anything you're like, I don't understand why CORC isn't addressing this when this is such a big thing in my and my friends and whatever's life, tell us.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So I think it's time
Is that my time?
Introduce our next guest.
Right.
I think, yeah. Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kate.
Have a good debate, and I look forward to hearing it.
Good luck with your future directing. Okay. So we have now coming on. He wants me to do a drum roll, but I'm not going to do that.
Please welcome to the stage.
Special guest.
Mark said bye, Kate.
Bye.
She's no longer with us now.
It sounds dramatic.
So do you want to move in a bit?
Yeah.
So Anand, do you want to introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Anand. I've known Beth for a while, in and out of Hearts and Minds, and she kind of asked me if I was interested to be involved in something like this, because I am very much interested in the mental health area, having experience, but also seeing it from this perspective of, you know, more organizationally and connecting that to the actual people, and how that all works and how we can, you know, better interpret what's going on for people, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess to mention generally, you know, we are quite keen to have, for example, each live chat, a different young person get involved. You know, we don't want this to be the same people time after time. Like, you know, kick us out, get you know, as many people as on board as possible. So let us know as well if that's something you're interested in doing. And welcome to the stage.
The stage is set.
Yeah. So if we kind of start the discussion-y bit, it's a technical term, discussion-y bit. I think the topic we wanted to talk about today is, I guess, do mental health services work? And what do we know? How do we know whether they work? And all things around that. So please do, as much as possible, comment your thoughts, because this really, the whole point we do this is so that it can be a two-way thing, and we can go wherever the people want to go with this conversation. So I feel like handing over to the research expert.
Sure.
What does research say about whether mental health services work?
Well, it says a lot of things. One of the things that it's important for us at CORC to kind of assess whether the services work or not is to look at the evidence that exists and the things that the services tell us about the people that they see. But sometimes that's not as linear as it sounds. So one of the things that we use is outcome measurement, and that's something that you can read all about in our newsletters and all the resources that we have available. But then we also need to think about whether or not we can trust that measurement, and that's something that we.
Yeah, and outcome measures are the sort of questionnaires people fill in. We've talked about this a bit before, but I think it's a term that's used often. It's helpful to kind of go over. But yeah, those questionnaires, I don't know if you've ever had them.
I've done a few. I've met some people who are very kind of jaded by the amount that they've done. So I think it's very important to be able to ask, rather than it just being a process that we go through without knowing what the implication of that is, to be able to say, okay, presumably you're giving me these questionnaires in order to improve the service, but how does that happen? Does it happen? And how effectively does it happen?
And what do we find out from it? So given that we have that process at the moment, and we don't know how ideal or not ideal it is particularly, what are some of the key sort of findings that you think have kind of stuck out to you?
I think we generally find that people do improve over time in terms of the scores that they have on those questionnaires. And this is as problematic as it sounds, because they are questionnaires and they're not perfect. And the data that we receive to analyze here and to look at how the scores are progressing over time, which is a good way of assessing, or at least trying to see if the service has been effective and if people are feeling better, that is also not perfect. So those are things that we need to consider when looking at any evidence around mental health services. And then most importantly is what are these questionnaires actually measuring, and how is that relevant to the person accessing the service or not? Because if it is, for example, a questionnaire just solely based on symptoms, and the symptoms do get better, does that mean that that person is getting better? And that's a whole other discussion around. And also we have to consider that they are not perfect, and if can we say that they are 100% accurate?
And what is better? Yeah.
And what is better? So it's all can of worms, if you will. Really.
I read something a while back that it would be helpful to check out. So I read that according to the outcome measures, which we know are not ideal, around in terms of reliable improvement. So how would you summarize reliable improvement? Like significant improvement?
Kind of. So imagine like you're trying to like measure someone's height with your hand, and like you're a really shaky person. So this is your outcome measure, right? And if I try to measure this, try to measure your height, and then every time I take this measurement, it's going to be different because my hand is shaking. So if you think about this shakiness as like measurement error, reliable change is basically a big calculation that we do that takes that into account.
Okay.
So
the shakiness.
Yeah, the shakiness. So the unreliability of the measure. So we have measures that are really reliable and we think they're really great, or not we as just CORC, the scientific community. But then we also have to take into account that there's some measurement error. So reliable change takes that into account, basically.
Kind of related to that, just seeing a comment come in. Keisha says, I work in the NHS and have lots of patients that get referred to CAMHS. Our patients have mixed reviews about CAMHS and how helpful it is to them, which certainly is reasonable. I wonder from that then if this is perhaps a bit of a loaded question, but if the patients are saying, well, some are saying it works, some are saying it doesn't work, or people are saying they're not sure how well it works, is that or is that not the end of the line, like the bottom line for if they say it kind of works, does that mean that the service kind of works, or is it more complicated than that, do you think?
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting as well, because, you know, certainly from my experience, I get similar feedback, and it isn't the way we work. Things are continue to be commissioned because we don't necessarily know any better. And I think that's, I guess, what I'd say to what you said as well, Keisha. Like, absolutely, there are issues with CAMHS, there are issues with mental health service in general, there are issues with lots of different kinds of services, but I think that's less to do with often anything specific about CAMHS or anything specific about mental health services, but more to do with the fact that, in my opinion, the way we view mental health and how we provide services as something that happens when you're ill and all of these things is not ideal. And I think that relates to what Amber was saying before about youth centres and how important they were, and the fact often we think about specialist stuff far too often. The statistic I saw was that actually, in terms of that reliable improvement, taking out the shakiness, it's around just less than 50% where you see the reliable improvement from when someone started treatment to when they ended treatment. Is that right or not?
Yeah, it's around that, and there's more criteria to be taken into account. They need to be closed cases for you to make that calculation, and you need to have at least 3 contact points, basically.
So when you say closed cases, so that's when someone has stopped using services after the treatment?
Yeah, the case is closed. They might have been re-referred, but we don't know that.
Okay, so it's a specific ending to that service at that point. And when you say 3 contacts, that's 3 times the questionnaire has been filled out. And I'm not sure I've ever filled out a measurement 3 times.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Often it's at first at assessment and then at discharge or at the end of the course of treatment. But it really depends on the service.
So Amber said there needs to be a purpose to these surveys. I imagine for GDPR reasons, perhaps we'll see a change. Instead of it being just another process, we need to be clear in why we're using the services. I guess that links into one of the questions we're interested in of this, of what the results are showing, both for, I guess, personally and sort of nationally or service-wide and stuff.
Amber is saying, I'm unsure what happens as a result of data collections / surveying, but wouldn't it be brilliant practice to have an update report as a result of common feedback? We made this change. Yeah, that's I think a really good thought. And some of our CORC members get out reports that are done with data based on the questionnaires that young people take in their services. But then it's up to them to do whatever they feel like with that report.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever personally, I don't know about you, Anand, but had a discussion where a professional has talked to me about the change in my I think I've had conversations at the start where they've said, more in a diagnosis context, sometimes like they said, this is what your questionnaire says about you and how you're doing, but never this is how we changed. I've only ever, I think, had it sent to me in a letter or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think I've even had that. And even that is an issue in itself, because then it just feels like the questionnaire is just a black hole. You put whatever you want and then it gets sent off and you have no idea what happens as a result.
Yeah. And Maya said, we need to remember that mental health and mental illness is incredibly complex, and it's not just health services that we need to consider. Absolutely. And actually that's something that CORC is thinking about in general at the moment, isn't it? So thinking about, we've got measurements now that we're helping with schools. I think we're doing a few for colleges. And we've also got a lot of kind of charities and stuff that are involved with CORC as well. And I think that's a move in general in mental health, that it became very specialist for a while and now is broadening. And so it'll be interesting to see how measurements follow with that. I mean, what do you think is helpful? Do you think, for example, if you were meeting with a youth worker, you feel like it would ruin it to have a questionnaire at the start or the end? Do you think that's it makes it clinical in that very action, or what are people's views on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I've heard many different responses to that from both people accessing services and also from practitioners who say that they find it's a really valuable moment of self-reflection where you have to think about the things that you're being asked. Obviously, it will depend on the questionnaire, and also from practitioners saying things like, it kind of breaks the moment and it's a bit awkward for everyone involved. So the people have different feelings about them in that context.
Yeah, and I think for me, the frustration with questionnaires, and again, I don't know how other people feel about this, is like, it's not the fact of doing them. Actually, I've, like you said, found it quite a helpful self-reflection thing, but it's the fact that nothing's ever been done with them that I know about, no conversations been had. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's, for me personally, I'd say that's part of the issue. But even on the other hand, like going further back than that, I saw there was a comment off the screen, I think from Maya as well earlier, where she said, like NHS questionnaires, and that honestly sums up some of the attitudes that I've seen from people, which is not more of these, and that in itself I see as an issue, because if people see them as a barrier or like an obstruction, again, I think it was Amber saying they're very time consuming. If that's the case, then how likely are people to really put the effort in to actually think about how they feel about it? And so are the responses they give going to be accurate? And if they're not, doesn't that corrupt the whole process?
Yeah, well, that's it. That's a few things there that I can comment on. The first one is it going to be accurate? One of the things that we need to always think about when it comes to like questionnaire information and data is that there's also noise in there. So like if you're having a really bad day and you're scoring your mood from like 1 to 5, you'll probably do a 5, and then when the actual answer would be a 3. So this distance between 3 and 5 is noise, basically. And this happens in not just with mental health questionnaires, just in general.
And so the noise is similar to the shakiness, or
it's I would just say a barrier when it comes to the perfection of data, mental health data. I think when we deal with human emotions and human behavior and things that are often assessed with these questionnaires, we need to take that into account. There's fluctuations and there's error and there's noise, and that's just how that data is.
It's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, like I was using an app called Youper, I think recently. I was trying something different out, and it had like a measurement thing, and when I was doing it, I felt interested, partly because I wasn't feeling so great, but actually when I was doing well again, I deleted the app because I got bored of it. And I remember from a conversation we've had of this before, someone who felt like they generally had quite as like even emotional state, or whatever the right way of describing it, actually found it quite boring to fill out. So I guess as well, it's you know, when are we paying attention to how we're feeling? Can questionnaires help with that? But also, like you said, you know, does our enthusiasm or lack of it, or sometimes resentment of it, affect the results as well? So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's also the general feeling of, if you're filling it out and you think, what am I getting out of this? Why am I doing this now? And if that's not clear from the service who's asking you, or a practitioner who's asking you to do that questionnaire, then I feel the motivation to fill it out might not be the same as if you would actually know, oh, this is helpful because, and this data will go this way and will provide this information to the service so that they can make changes, like someone was mentioning earlier. I think if the process was a bit clearer, then maybe people would be a bit more invested in it.
That's a good point. It's not just the questionnaire and what's contained in it, but also how it's presented to you,
exactly,
and the information you get around its usage.
Someone was saying earlier, like, what happens to that? And you said it's a black hole, so fill this out, and then where does it go? And that's, I think, a really important thing to consider when talking about this.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's crazy that these forms that we fill out kind of begrudgingly, like because we're told we have to, actually can have a massive impact in what happens nationally in terms of commissioning and things. And it's also crazy the fact that, I mean, what do people think of that just under 50% score? Because for me personally, I know that sometimes when services weren't working for me, I felt like it was my fault. And actually, if I'd known that actually our services are, you know, they work for some people, they don't for others, and that will be the case at different points in different people's lives, and sometimes it might work for sometimes it won't. I think that would have maybe been a bit of something to a difficult pill to swallow at first, but would have been really helpful for me to know. And
do you want to just reiterate the 50%, what exactly that was about?
Well, it's a paper that looks at reliable change on a large data set, and it shows around that amount of children and young people reliably improving. So taking into consideration the shaky hand, basically. And that is also across different measures. So not just one single measurement of things. It does seem, from what I see in other services as well, it does seem to be generally what we find.
Right.
But that is the calculation for reliably improving. If you just look at difference of scores between time 1 and time 2, the numbers are a little bit different, and it has large variation across services.
Yeah, and you know, we're often, particularly when you get to a more severe or complex like level with mental health problems, you're told mental health services are the only answer. But if mental health services, we know, are perhaps only helping or only contributing to the improvement of around 50%, you know, surely we should be pointing even people who have quite complex experiences going on to all sorts of different things, because the more things we try, the more likely we'll find something that works for us. You know, so we've got some comments. So it says, this has made me think. One disadvantage of baseline surveys, in my experience, is it asks you how you've been in the last week or two, but often due to long waiting lists, our figures responses perhaps don't reflect reality or how serious things have been.
That's a really good point. A lot of outcome measures do ask you to reflect on a past period. Sometimes it's a bit longer than that, so it's like a month, but quite often just last week. And that's something that has to do with the way the questionnaires were designed to assess not how you're feeling on the current day, but as we've touched upon before, that's something that also impacts the way you're answering. So if you're having a really bad day, then you're probably more likely to be scoring a little bit higher than you would normally.
Right.
Even if you're trying to reflect to the past. And sometimes that instruction is not clear either. So there's a lot of things around this, really.
Yeah, I think that's reflected in what Amber continues to say. Really go back to the one before after. She says, what I meant by that is, for example, if I had a good week, I could seem quite stable on paper and I would be discharged, but that ignores the fact that for the last month, for example, I've been incredibly low. So that kind of is just testament to what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it has to do as well with how often these things are measured and how you're taking that answer as well, and how you're taking that into the context of talking to the young person, so not reading just that summary of scores without any context. Because you can score, and even you can score really, and this goes back to the discussion between well-being and the difference between well-being and mental ill health. You can score quite highly on a well-being measure, but you can then score really poorly on another measure that's more diagnosis focused. So things need to be taken into account.
I think it's quite an interesting area, maybe possibly from what Maya is saying. She says our youth workers don't have questionnaires, but they hold written notes on the young people that talks about how they went through from referral to discharge. And they work in a goal-based format, so the young person measure themselves how they're doing against their goal. And I wonder, putting this to you guys, this more sort of qualitative way of looking at how people are doing, what's the advantage to doing it like a data-based format compared to just being able to look at each person and write down, okay, this is roughly how they're doing, etc.
I think the main difference would be that with the kind of qualitative data, it's more difficult to aggregate. And if you want to have
and when you say aggregate, what do you mean?
Just compile everything together, just look at the scores of everyone as a big group, which also has its problems. But if you want to tell a service, oh, the young people that you're seeing are progressing or not progressing, improving or not improving, you have to look at the general picture. The goals is a really good example. There are measures that they're called ideographic, which is a really weird word, but it just means that it can be like tailored, so like bespoke. So goals-based outcomes is one of those measures where you can just write down a goal that you have, and then you track it along the time, and you track it numerically, so it becomes quantitative data at the end of the day, but it's also associated with a qualitative aspect, which is the goal that you've set. It then can be categorized into themes as well, so that's
because you're choosing it and not because it's a symptom or something like that.
It's a goal.
So it's some nice way in between.
Compromise.
I guess from the sounds of it, qualitative is really good for individuals, perhaps, but it's very difficult to do anything with it on a wide national or service level, unless we use something like the goals outcome where there is numbers somehow. Is that?
Yeah, you can look at the numbers, and then you can also categorize qualitative data as well. So create just like kind of bigger, broader categories where that goal or that piece of the notes that you've taken would fall into. And that's just one way of like compiling things, and then you can look on a more general sense. But the goals, I think, are really, really helpful instrument because it allows the young person to put things into context. And even if then you actually have to take a number or pick a number on how you're progressing, because it's a goal, you can have, I think, a better sense of, oh, I'm closer to 7 because I've made a bit more progress on this.
Plus, it's something I want, rather than something that someone tells me I should.
And generally, we get good feedback from young people on using goal type measures.
But services don't use them that much, do they?
No, not really.
So, and I guess Amber said, definitely on my last mental health assessment, when asked if I had anything else to say, I made sure my clinician had written, "Today is a good day for Amber, so responses do not reflect or may not reflect my reality." I really agree with you, Amber, and I actually kind of recently had an experience where it was the opposite, where I ended up in quite a bad situation. I like in a way that hadn't been for a really, really long time. And, we're talking like 3-4 years. And the first thing that the professional said to me was, "I see this is something that you do regularly." And it was going to A&E, and they had completely looked at my notes and my history and said, this is something that you do all the time. And I felt to myself, hang on a minute, that's the difference between when I was 18 and when I'm 22. And they haven't considered that at all. So I think it both works in a positive way of them assuming that it's all positive and in a negative way of them assuming that sometimes you can't achieve things or you can't move past certain things.
Yeah, I had a similar thing recently as well. I had a kind of assessment with sort of lead psychologist it was, and I'd seen him a few years ago in a similar manner. And I guess there's the difficulty with looking on an aggregate scale is that it's difficult to keep in mind the actual specifics of what's happened in the meantime to that person. It's like he said something along the lines of, when I came in, like, I see nothing has changed in the last 3 years then. And it's like, well, if you look at my situation on a very broad level, circumstances are somewhat similar, but that doesn't take into account anything of what I've experienced, what I've learned. So I guess that's part of the difficulty.
Yeah, whereas perhaps if there'd been a goal there, you could say,
good point.
Well, actually, yeah, you may not feel that because you're measuring this, but according to this goal, however big or small, I have achieved this. Or in a case where you're feeling really difficult and someone's trying to push you into saying perhaps that things are better, you can say, actually, I'm still a long way or whatever.
Yeah, Maya says if you do these questionnaires regularly, you learn how to answer them to get the score you want. For example, I know how to get a really high or really low score, which may not actually reflect how I really am. Which is, I've seen similar thing with people when you can tell that once they've done enough, it's almost kind of instinctive. It's like, okay, that one is this. So maybe over time, do you think what's the word I'm looking for? Almost effectiveness of the questionnaires is eroded, like the more that people have done, because the
more they're exposed to the same one.
Yeah,
in a way, I think so. In a way, one of the things that is looked at when you're developing a questionnaire, when you're creating a questionnaire, is how it kind of stands the test of time, basically, and how similar the scores are from different time points, but also it's kept in mind that you're not supposed to take it so many times like that because we obviously used to it. Some are better than others at tracking through time. Others are not meant to even be used to track through time. So there's all shapes and sizes really for questionnaires. So I do get what you mean. At some point, it just might become a little bit irrelevant.
And I guess as well, that depends on whether you have this sounds more negative than I'm meaning it, but an agenda to push or not. And looking at the context, almost all young people who access services, because of the situation and them being incredibly hard to access, do have an agenda. We feel that we need support, and it's very difficult to get that. So, I think absolutely that must affect things. I certainly know that I've done things like that, and actually used to feel quite ashamed of it, and now don't feel that way because it puts young people, I think, in a very difficult situation of feeling like they have to earn services and treatment. I remember once putting my ending score for a treatment much higher than I thought it was, because I thought if I did it too bad, like too low, they'd assume that this hasn't helped me, and they'd not offer me anything again because they'd give up on me. Do you relate to that?
Yeah, I understand what you mean from that. I guess it kind of feeds into all of it, about similar to what Maya was saying as well. You kind of influence the way that you answer it depending on your experience, how you're feeling, what you might hope for the future, like you said, or even just what you would wish that you had got out from the service in a way. So I can relate to that.
I've also, on a similar note, heard young people talk about when they've been worried that a service they rely on, or at least it's the only service in their area, could be cut, to put them scoring it higher as well, because they don't realise that it's often used in much bigger contexts than that. So I guess these are all the sorts of things that can be going through people's heads when they're not explained to about these questionnaires, like you're saying, Amber. Like, they're not explained why they're filling them in, what's going to be done with it. And I don't know what you think as someone who's kind of involved in this world, Louise, but I think that's also partly to do with the separation between the research and the scientific world and the service provider and professional practitioner world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's because of the limited amount of research that exists looking into these things. So in this country, there are only a few people that look at these, and CORC is one of these organizations that actually looks at data from mental health services. And we do research with it, and we write up and we publish papers and we put evidence out there, but they're still quite limited. So there's a lot of things we don't know. We're looking a lot at goals here at CORC, and I do some research with the goal-based outcomes, and there's so much that we want to find out about those things. We also want to find out about the people that show no change or deterioration, so they get worse in our data sets. Why is that happening? Because we can say, oh, this amount of people have improved, but who are these people? What is predicting that improvement? What characteristics that we know of them might be related to that? So there's some studies related to ethnicity as well. So we do some research, really good research into data for mental health services, but I think it's still very little at the moment, nationwide and even worldwide, really.
And I think this is sometimes a bit of a controversial point, but I also think we are sometimes quite scared of that data, in terms of, I notice when I share that that statistic about the just under 50% thing, everyone finds every reason why that's not accurate. And whilst I do think absolutely those things need to be taken into context, I mean, no research is perfectly accurate. There are issues in every single way we measure something, unless, I don't know, it's either yes or no, or something like that. So, I think often it's like young people are too vulnerable for this information to be shared. The public need to be thinking about funding services rather than losing hope in them. But actually, if this is the reality, that's something we need to be thinking about. And I think we all know that sometimes things are helpful, and a lot of the time something different is needed, or basically we all know that we have some positive experience, but also some very negative experiences often. So why do we think that knowing a number to show that will suddenly change all these young people's minds and suddenly make them give up on services completely?
Yeah, I wonder if you guys talking about something different, if we want to talk about having looked at mental health services, putting that aside, or say assuming that doesn't work, what else is there aside from mental health services that could work, and how can we evaluate that, say, for instance?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it's really hard to compare as well. There's something called the dodo bird verdict. Have you heard of this?
No.
It's like it's based on Alice in Wonderland, and it's basically this theory that says that all forms of psychotherapy or psychological therapy, regardless of techniques, produce the same outcomes. And there are people on the two sides of the debate, and there's research on two sides of the debate. And depending where you stand on that side of the debate, you will be accused of having an agenda. So one way that we as researchers look at how to compare these two things is basically do a big compilation of research that we call a meta-analysis. And then because it's an analysis beyond the analysis, so we look at all these papers that were written up, and then we compare, and we do like some statistics around it, and then we
So you take existing research and then you do research on that research.
Yeah, exactly. So I will take basically a researchception. I'll take like all the papers that were written on like cognitive behavioral therapy, and then all the papers that were written on, I don't know, art therapy, and then look at all of them together. So there's evidence on both sides of the debate, but on the side that says this is actually not necessarily true, just to give you an example, there's a multitude of studies, and including those meta-analyses, that show that cognitive behavioral therapy is actually more effective for people with anxiety problems, for example. And then we calculate something called an effect size, and it'll show you like how high this is. And then you can actually see for those, the research is telling you it's quite high for anxiety problems. So this is one way of comparing, but as you see, this is something that's quite complex, and it's something that it's really not out there for everyone to.
Yeah.
No one's going to look at a meta-analysis. It's,
yeah.
It's scary. The name is scary.
I don't know. I, for one, spend every evening reading through a nice meta-analysis.
Light reading.
Yeah, light reading. But it's also massively skewed, right, as well, because they're only researching some things, and often it's the things that I guess self-interest plays a part in terms of, we're researching the things that are already happening in services because we want to prove that they're working or not working.
Basically. And each side of the debate accuses the other one of having an agenda.
Which is probably the case. We all have agendas. And Maya said, in the past, I needed support, and so I answered questionnaires in a way that I knew would get me that support. 100%. I know very few people who haven't done
tampered.
Done that, tampered, but actually,
it's perfectly
helped themselves.
Given the situation.
Yes, and so given the context as it is, and given that actually, most mental health services are kind of firefighting. Most professionals are firefighting. There has been a lot of cuts and things we've all heard about a lot. Should we be not covering up, but should we be quietening this information, or actually does it not really change the reality of the fact that we need to be looking at things wider and assessing? Because my point is, for me, I was told for a long time of my activism and the stuff I've been involved with in mental health that you need to be constantly campaigning for services to receive more funding, and I still feel that services should receive more funding, but I've now realized that I said that because mental health charities and because services told me I should say that, when actually now I think, yes, services need more funding, but we also need to think about a lot of different ways of helping people in a lot of different ways. Maya says, the third sector plays a huge role in supporting young people, but incredibly difficult to measure and compare to each other. All areas will have different third sector activities, which make it hard to research.
Absolutely. It's one of the problems is it's very difficult to compare, at least on a nationwide setting. I think this is a very good example on where more qualitative line of thinking can help, where we go out there and talk to young people about what has been effective and what's been good for you. And the Anna Freud Center, for example, has done some work with that in terms of self-care strategies and has compared a few things. But I think more research is needed, but like Mary is saying, it's really difficult.
And to bridge that gap on what's not self-care and what's not mental health specialist.
The other thing.
So I'm aware of time and the fact that we probably need to be wrapping up. I guess maybe it would be good if we each, went through something particularly interesting we think we've talked about, or something that's made us think, and it would be really helpful to hear from you guys as well how you found this chat, what you think would be interesting to talk about next, and any key things that you found interesting or not interesting. Feel free to say that stuff as
also
well.
Important.
Everything. Who wants to?
I can go first.
Sure.
So like I said, I'm a researcher, so I don't really get the chance to have these conversations a lot because I'm locked away looking at spreadsheets. But it's been really, really helpful to hear from everyone about how they feel about the outcome measures. I look at this data every day, but I never get the other side, the perspective of someone who's filling it out. So for me, that was really important. I think really good points were made here. And for me, the highlight would be this discussion and the conversation that around it. We didn't promise solutions or didn't promise a verdict at the end of it, but I think we touched upon really, really important topics.
Yeah. As a result of this conversation, all services will be funded loads more. All services will be cut. And,
vote for Beth.
And vote for Beth. She will get overwhelmed and run away. So Lock5718 has said, I like Luisha's fun facts. So many things I've never heard of before.
Thank you.
And Mark has said, agreed. He's a mine of information.
A
mine.
You've got your own Louise fan club going
So
here.
just to go with that fun fact, we made a joke about how like someone will have to do like a poll or like eat a Malteser or something every time Louise says the word data.
I think I've only said like a handful of times.
I know, I've been like, what's going on here?
Oh, it's really well behaved.
In terms of my highlight, I think for me it's just general excitement about you know, I feel a bit like, let me start this again. A passion of mine, I think, is making sure that young people are reliably informed about the services and just general context they are accessing. I know that for a while my views were really, really impacted by who I was getting those views from, because that was the only place I could get information. And so any conversation like this where we can widen who's involved in thinking about this research and allow more people to understand it and therefore impact it really excites me. So that's me.
I was quite interested by the part we had when we were talking about the kind of biases, like unconscious biases that we have in responding to stuff like the questionnaires, and the fact that you on the other side of analyzing it take that into consideration. I mean, it makes sense, but I hadn't really thought about it. So it's not just a case of, oh, if we're not filling them in right, then it's completely gone. It's like actually looking at all of it, we can consider that there's going to be some fluctuation and stuff like that. And like Mark says, I love data. That wasn't even prompted, I don't think.
Maya said her favourite part was me swearing. Thank you, Maya, for
that.
that
comment. That was quite fun.
That was important.
And Locke said that they completely agree with you. So I guess one last thing before we go is, do you still find this live chat a helpful format? Do you still enjoy it? And what do you want to talk about next? So while we're giving you some time to comment on that, I mean, I personally think there are a lot of views coming up that were really interesting at the start about the well-being versus mental health thing. So that would be quite a good place. Especially considering like CORC is already thinking about that concept, and so it can.
And there's research already on it as well, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I think it's a really important topic, and it's really current as well. Like, I don't want to use the word hot topic, but well-being is a hot topic right now. So yeah, it's and one that I think people feel often very strong things either way, but often neither of those strong things are particularly informed by research. Evidence,
yeah. How about you? Do you have any strong feelings about what next to discuss?
I'm not sure. I feel like it almost sort of spawns organically from what we're talking about and what people are interested in. Like Locke says, I like that you explain research terms, for example, reliable change. I think this is a really important aspect of just the whole idea of the live chat. It's a break from things being put out there by different sides, and it's just like, okay, we've put this out there, this is it, and you can do whatever you want with it. It's like, actually, we can put some things out there, and then you can say, hold on, I don't understand what that is, or what's the significance of that. And like you said at the beginning, having this kind of two-way conversation is completely necessary if we want to get anywhere with improving things, because you need both sides to be heard.
Definitely.
I agree, and I think one of the good things about CORC, and as biased as I am because I work at CORC, is that we are very much down to sitting down with young people and talking about these things, and everyone can just send us an email or a DM to Anya, and she'll put you in touch with the relevant people to have a conversation. So do not hesitate if you actually want to get in touch. If you want to ask what is reliable change again, and you don't remember my name, you can send DM to Anya on Twitter or send us an email, and I will get in touch with you. She'll let me know, and I'll get in touch with you. And the same for Kate or for Beth or for anyone in the team, really. We are really open. So
yeah, Lock 5718 said vote for Anand.
We've had a vote for Beth, vote for Anand.
No, it's funny.
I think no one voted for me. They voted for my swearing.
Louise has his own fan club started.
They voted for Louise's data.
That's true. I can live with that.
So that's really helpful to know. Maya said, yeah, it's really helpful. I'd love to see one on wellbeing, mental health, emotional distress, mental illness. Mark's voted for Luisian data. Guys, I can't take much of this. I guess before we go, to find out when our next chat is going to be, since you feel positively about it, sign up to the newsletter, become a network member on the website, and follow our Twitter. A lot of the kind of ongoing, the newsletter is once a month, am I right in that? Once a month, and the Twitter is constant, so it's a really good way of keeping up to date. And like we said at the start, sign up to the newsletter and follow the Twitter as well, because we're going to have opportunities coming out to get involved with stuff, hopefully in the next newsletter. Plus, come along to our forum if you possibly can. And
21st of November.
Yes, and if there's anything that's getting in the way of you coming for whatever reason, please reach out to me or CORC or anyone on Twitter and say that, or email. You know, we might not be able to come up with a magic solution, but we can think about if there's anything that's
definitely
getting in the way of someone being able to attend. So on that note, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your contributions. I just always really enjoy these chats. And we will see you again to talk about, sounds like the vote is for the wellbeing, mental health, emotional distress. And again, we need to think of a much catchier.
We'll figure something out. Anya is here, she'll help.
Anya, magic comms. And thank you, before we go, to Martha, Lucy, Anya, and Nick, and particularly Lucy, who is not being paid for this in the same way that the others were, and has been doing amazing tweets and stuff. Yes, all right, brilliant. Okay, thanks everyone, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.